Today's documentary, The Vanishing, the Sodder Family Mystery. The flames tore through the silent Appalachian night, a violent orange scar against the black sky. It was Christmas Eve, 1945, and the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, was being consumed with a ferocity that seemed almost personal. By dawn, all that remained were smoldering timbers and a pile of ash. But as the smoke cleared, a deeper horror emerged. 5 children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty Sodder, were gone. Not just dead, but vanished. No bones, no teeth, no fragments of clothing. Nothing. In a fire that should have left behind indelible remains, there was only a haunting, inexplicable void. How does a family of 5 simply disappear from the face of the earth on the holiest of nights? This is not just a story of a fire. It is a story of a mystery that defies logic, a parent's unyielding love, and clues that whisper of a darker truth. To understand the depth of this mystery, we must first meet the family at its heart. George Sodder was an Italian immigrant who had carved out a piece of the American dream in the rugged hills of West Virginia. He arrived in the United States as a teenager, full of ambition, and through sheer determination, he built a successful coal trucking business. He married Jenny, a woman of Sicilian heritage, and together they raised a bustling household of 10 children. By 1945, their home on a hill overlooking Fayetteville was a testament to their hard work, a modest wooden frame house that echoed with the laughter and chaos of a large, close-knit family. The Sodders were well known and respected, but George's outspoken nature and his origins sometimes made him a figure of scrutiny in a post-war America still grappling with prejudice. The year 1945 was a time of celebration. World War II had ended, and the Sodder children, like millions of others, were looking forward to a peaceful Christmas. But in the days leading up to December 24th, a series of eerie incidents cast a shadow. A stranger came to the door, aggressively offering life insurance. When George refused, the man glared and said, "Your house is going to go up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." George dismissed it as a tasteless sales tactic, but Jenny felt a chill she couldn't shake. Then, on Christmas Eve itself, the family's telephone, a vital lifeline in those days, suddenly went dead. Jenny had used it successfully earlier in the evening to wish relatives a Merry Christmas. Now, there was only silence. George checked the receiver, but the problem seemed to be outside. With the hour late, they decided to wait until morning to report it. As the family prepared for bed, the younger children, Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, excitedly discussed Santa's impending visit before climbing the stairs to their attic bedroom. George made his usual rounds, noting the wooden ladder that always leaned against the house, right by the children's window, was in its place. He locked up, and the house settled into what should have been a restful Christmas Eve sleep. But peace was the last thing this night would bring. It was approximately 1 a.m. on December 25th when Jennie Sodder awoke to a loud thud on the roof, followed by a rolling sound. Then, the smell, acrid, pungent, the unmistakable scent of smoke. She shook George awake, and they burst into the hallway to find flames already racing up the staircase, a wall of heat blocking access to the attic. George shouted for the children, but the roar of the fire drowned his voice. He rushed outside, intending to grab the ladder and reach the attic window. But the ladder was gone. It had vanished. Panic set in. He ran to his trucks, thinking he could drive one close to the house and use it as a platform. But none of the vehicles would start. Not one. The batteries, all of them, were dead. Meanwhile, Jenny and the older children who had escaped, Marion, John, and Sylvia, frantically tried to find another way, throwing rocks at the attic window to break it, but the heat was too intense. Neighbors, awakened by the glow, began to arrive, but the nearest fire hydrant was ineffective, with barely a trickle of water. The Fayetteville Fire Department, alerted not by the Sodder's dead phone, but by a passerby, arrived far too late. The house was an inferno, collapsing in on itself with a terrifying finality. As the sun rose on Christmas morning, George and Jenny stood amidst the steaming ruins, clinging to each other and to the hope that their 5 children had somehow escaped. But hope curdled into dread as the firemen began to sift through the debris. They expected to find charred remains. They found none. The fire chief, F. J. Morris, claimed the heat from the coal stored in the basement must have been so intense, up to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, that it completely cremated the bodies. But George Sodder, a man who worked with coal daily, knew better. Coal burns hot, but not hot enough to vaporize bone and teeth. He walked the ashes himself, finding small, personal items that survived: a ceramic doll's head, a few coins, a metal bedspring. But of the children, there was not a trace. The official report, issued within days, concluded the cause was an electrical fault in the attic wiring. Case closed. But for George and Jennie, the questions were just beginning. Where was the ladder? Why was the phone line cut at the pole? Who had tampered with the trucks? And most chillingly, why did a neighbor report seeing a strange car parked near the house that night, with shadowy figures moving about? The inconsistencies mounted, transforming grief into a relentless quest for truth. George Sodder became a detective on a mission, challenging the official narrative at every turn. He hired a private investigator, C. Tinsley, and together they uncovered baffling evidence. The electrical theory was shaky. An independent electrician examined the remains and stated that the wiring in the attic showed no signs of an overload origin point. In fact, some wires were still intact, insulated, suggesting the fire might have started elsewhere, possibly with an accelerant. Then there were the witnesses. A bus driver named Earl Morris came forward, stating that around 1:30 a.m. on Christmas morning, he had seen a car carrying children who matched the Sodders' descriptions. They looked, he said, scared and quiet. Another account from a woman named Beulah Wright claimed she saw children being hurried into a vehicle near the Sodder property that night. These sightings were dismissed by the local sheriff as unreliable, but to the Sodders, they were lifelines. George began to believe his children had been kidnapped and the fire set to cover the crime. But who would do such a thing? Theories swirled. George had been vocal about his criticism of Mussolini making enemies within Fayetteville's Italian community. Some whispered of a vendetta. Others speculated about a black market adoption ring, preying on children in the chaotic post-war era. The Sodders even received an anonymous letter accusing a local coroner of being involved in a cover-up. The emotional stakes skyrocketed as the family faced not only the agony of loss, but also the frustration of institutional indifference. George erected a large billboard on the site of the fire, offering a $5,000 reward for information, a massive sum at the time. He traveled to nearby states, following leads that always seemed to evaporate. The strain was immense, but Jennie Sodder was his rock, her faith unshakable. She once said, "I know my children are alive. A mother feels these things." Their home became a shrine to the missing, a constant, painful reminder of the hole in their hearts. And just when despair threatened to overwhelm them, a piece of evidence arrived that would change everything. In 1949, for years after the fire, Jennie Sodder opened her mailbox to find a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph. It showed a handsome young man in his early 20s, dressed in a smart suit, standing proudly in front of a late-model car. On the back, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Ely boys." Frankie was the Sodder son who had been in the army during the fire. The family was stunned. The resemblance to their missing son Louis was striking. The same eyes, the same set of the jaw, the same smile. It was, they believed, Louis as a young adult. The photograph was analyzed and traced to a photography studio in Tampa, Florida. George and a private detective immediately traveled south, but the studio had no records of the subject. The photographer had died, and the trail went cold. Yet, the image was a seismic event for the family. It was proof, they felt, that at least one of their children was alive. But it was also a torment. Where was he? Who sent it? And why? The phrase Ely boys was puzzling. Some speculated it referred to Ilioni, an Italian fraternal organization, or was a misspelling of Ily, meaning from Italy. The mystery deepened. Other leads followed. A woman from New York contacted the Sodders, claiming she had seen the children in a Catholic orphanage, where they were being held under different names. George investigated, but the orphanage denied any knowledge. Another report came from a man who met a young woman in Charleston who confessed to being Betty Sodder before fleeing. Each tip was pursued with desperate hope, and each dissolved into dead ends. The years took their toll. George Sodder, worn down by the struggle and the heartache, died of a heart attack in 1969. On his deathbed, he whispered to his surviving children, "Don't stop looking." Jennie lived 2 more decades, a widow clinging to the belief that her babies were out there, passing away in 1989. The surviving Sodder children, Marion, John, Sylvia, and Frank, inherited the quest, but as decades turned into generations, the mystery only seemed to grow more impenetrable. The case was revisited by journalists and amateur sleuths, each uncovering new layers of oddity. For instance, it was revealed that the county coroner had never officially declared the children dead, leaving their legal status in limbo. And the original fire scene was allegedly disturbed before a proper investigation could be done, with the ruins bulldozed and covered with soil soon after the fire, potentially destroying evidence. Today, the vanishing of the Sodder children remains one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Forensic scientists who have reviewed the case in modern times point out that even the hottest house fires rarely destroy all human remains. Teeth and bone fragments almost always survive. The complete absence of any remains is, in their words, highly unusual and suspicious. The list of anomalies reads like a detective novel. The missing ladder, the cut phone line, the disabled trucks, the ominous warning, the eyewitness sightings, the mysterious photograph. Was it a kidnapping? A revenge plot? An accident compounded by a tragic series of coincidences and a botched investigation? The theories are many, but the truth is elusive. The Sodder family's legacy is not one of closure, but of unwavering resilience. Their story transcends a simple cold case. It is a profound meditation on love, loss, and the human need for answers. It reminds us that some wounds never heal, and some questions never fade. The hill in Fayetteville where the house once stood is now an empty lot, but the memory of Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and Betty Sodder endures. Their vanishing on that Christmas Eve so long ago continues to grip our imagination because it challenges our very understanding of reality. How can 5 children disappear without a trace? In the end, the Sodder mystery is a testament to the fact that some stories have no ending, only an echo that reverberates through time, a silent cry for justice that still waits to be answered. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, please subscribe to our channel. We bring you fascinating documentaries on history, science, civilizations, mysteries, and the untold stories that shaped our world. Hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss a new release. See you in the next one.